I'd like to welcome you. My name is Bruce Fagan. My partner in crime here is Norwin Murrens, and we run the webinars for FJMC, and we have a real good one for you tonight. Norwin will tell you about that, but this webinar falls under our inclusion initiative. And just to tell you a little bit about the inclusion initiative, we do a quarterly magazine called Pride and Prejudice. It comes out in your email. The most recent edition was about modern Jewish families. The May 1st edition will include submissions about how we each define pride in ourselves and others. And you can contribute to future editions by submitting your thoughts or a letter to the editor, and I'll give you an email address in another minute. One of our new initiatives is to remind ourselves of the many commemorations around the world that celebrate a wide variety of cultural, religious, and national aspects in our wide world of interests and beliefs. For example, in April alone, it's Community Service Month, Earth Month, Autism Awareness Month, Arab American Heritage Month, Diversity Month. And in April, we celebrate Passover, World Autism Awareness Day, National Day of Silence, Youth Homelessness Matters Day, Husband Appreciation Day, I like that one, Earth Day, and of course Easter as well. If you're interested in participating in FJMC International's Inclusion Initiative, please contact Jerry Brodsky, who runs it, J. Brodsky, Brodsky, J. Brodsky, at fjmc.org, and I'll put that in the chat. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, and I will monitor them along with Norwin, and we will shoot them one over to Rabbi Crane. There were a couple of people that put questions in the chat when they registered, and unfortunately, it never got transmitted to me correctly, so I will get them to Rabbi Crane so he can see them as well. And without any further ado,
good evening to everyone joining us in the United States across 4 time zones. So it could be a late afternoon if you're out on the West Coast, but we're going to move forward. My name is Norwin Murrens, and for the past 4 years, Bruce and I have worked together very closely on these FJMC webinars, and with a lot of pride and success, we continue to move forward. As a matter of introduction, for those that are more directly familiar with the FJMC, until last July of 2025, most people associated FJMC with the Federation of Jewish Men's Clubs. That is, in many respects, part of 98 years of success, recognizing that identity. At the convention in Chicago last summer, the board, the international board, moved forward with a rebranding of FJMC, which encompasses friendship, Judaism, mentorship, and community. And as we speak of community this evening, there are many challenges and issues that the FJMC is addressing currently, and they cover the areas of wellness, physical activity and keeping in shape, and recharging every once in a while to keep everything in focus, which includes one's mental health and spiritual. And it's timely that we have this program this evening entitled Healing Mind, Body, and Soul, Mental Health Through Jewish Wisdom. And our featured presenter is Rabbi Nate Crane, who assumed the pulpit at Beth Hillel B'nai Emunah in Wilmette, Illinois, which is about 15 miles directly north of downtown Chicago. He has been with BHBE since 2019. And building on his current leadership, Rabbi Crane also serves on the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards, CJLS, governing body of 25 voting rabbis determining Jewish law and practice for the conservative movement as a whole. And he follows a long tradition of Beth Hillel rabbinical predecessors in this area. Continuing his engagement in community and community service, Rabbi Crane sits on the board of the Anti-Defamation League's Midwest region and the community mikvah of the conservative movement. He is the recipient of the Start Me Up Fellowship and grant from Valley Beit Midrash. Before or prior to his current leadership roles, and before joining BHPE, he served as a rabbi at Congregation B'nai Tikva in Deerfield, Illinois, and most recently as a rabbi at Congregation Or Zion in Scottsdale, Arizona. And while at Congregation Or Zion, Rabbi Crane founded the nonprofit Hagigah, dedicated to providing accessible, engaging, and fun Jewish holiday celebrations for individuals with disabilities and their families. Rabbi Crane's academic journey has also shaped his path. He earned a bachelor's degree in psychology from American Jewish University in Los Angeles and a master's degree in rabbinic studies and ordination from the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies. On a personal note, he is married to Rachel, and together they are the proud parents of two very fine daughters. It's my pleasure to welcome Rabbi Crane, and I know that everyone that's tuned in this evening should find this program very inspiring, and hopefully we can continue this conversation in a number of areas, adding on to what Rabbi Crane will be addressing this evening in the area of mental health. So Rabbi Crane, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, Norwin, and thank you, Bruce, for the invitation to speak this evening. I'm grateful to be learning with FJMC International tonight about a topic that touches so many of our lives. Before we begin, I want to invite us to think of someone we know who has struggled with mental health. It may be a friend, a family member, a colleague, or perhaps even ourselves. This is a topic I care deeply about, both as someone who studied psychology before entering the rabbinate and as a rabbi who sits with people during some of the most difficult moments of their lives. Mental health is not something that affects only a few people on the margins. It touches every family, every community, and often many of us personally. Mental health challenges affect millions of people whose lives are otherwise full. People who work and create and compete and laugh and love and inspire each day. In fact, roughly 1 in 5 adults in the United States experiences some form of mental health challenge each year. Yet, despite how common these struggles are, mental health often remains stigmatized and unspoken, including even within our Jewish communities. Tonight, I'd like to explore this topic through 3 lenses. First, through the lens of the Bible. Second, through the wisdom of the rabbis. And finally, 3 Jewish values that can guide how we respond today. One of the earliest and most striking examples in the story of King Saul is the story of the first king of Israel. The Bible tells us that Saul was afflicted by what the text calls a troubling or evil spirit. At times, he experienced intense emotional distress, and these episodes were marked by agitation, paranoia, and instability. In response, young David is brought to the palace to play music for him. And when David plays his harp, Saul finds relief. Even in this ancient story, we see an early recognition that emotional suffering is real. and that healing can come through music, presence, and human connection. At the same time, the story of Saul is also tragic. Despite moments of calm, he continues to struggle. His emotional turmoil leads to unpredictable and even dangerous behavior, including attempts to harm David, the person who supported King Saul throughout his most afflicted moments. And Saul also had moments of profound instability. The text doesn't give us a clinical diagnosis, but it does give us something just as important: an honest portrayal of a leader who is struggling deeply and visibly. We have another powerful example, and this one comes from the prophet Elijah. After a dramatic and exhausting confrontation with the prophets of Baal, Elijah flees into the wilderness, physically depleted and emotionally overwhelmed. He sits beneath a tree and cries out, "It is enough, O God, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." This is not just fatigue. Elijah cannot see a way forward. The great prophet who had just performed these incredible miracles now feels completely alone and without hope. And what does God do in this moment? God does not offer a lecture. God does not respond with rebuke. Instead, an angel appears and offers Elijah rest, food, and gentle care. The angel says, "Get up and eat." And Elijah rests, and then he eats, and then he rests again. And the message of this moment is subtle but profound. The message is, before we can restore the spirit, we must sometimes first care for the body. Before we can find meaning, we may need rest, nourishment, and time. There's also something deeply moving about how Elijah's story is framed in our tradition. When the psalmist sees this episode, he writes, "The Holy One is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." Jewish tradition never pretends that faithful people do not struggle. Instead, it teaches that even in moments of despair, we're never alone. In later texts, this Jewish wisdom continues, especially in the sense of this conversation. In Pirkei Avot, the wisdom of our sages, the rabbis ask a question: who is strong? We might expect the answer to be that it's a warrior who is strong, or a conqueror who is strong. But the rabbis answer, the strong one is the one who conquers their inner impulse. Strength in Jewish tradition is never about domination over others. It is the courage to confront the battles within ourselves. So, if we view mental health through this light, what we see is that caring for one's mental health is not a weakness. It is a form of strength. The rabbis of the Talmud are primary text of the rabbinic period from 400 to 600 of the Common Era, written in Babylonia. These rabbis also understood something profound about emotional suffering. They tell the story of Honi the circle maker. Honi, after falling asleep for 70 years, he awakens to find that no one recognizes him. In other words, the world has moved on without him. And first he tries to connect with the scholars, but they don't believe that he is who he says he is. They don't believe that this individual is Honi. Honi lived 70 years ago. You couldn't possibly be this incredible leader. So Honi, of course, his connection with his people is cut off. Eventually, Honi is overwhelmed by loneliness, and he cries out either companionship or death. The rabbis understood something that modern psychology now confirms. Lo tov heyot adam levado. It is not good for human beings to be alone. Human beings cannot live without connection. After all, the Hebrew word for connection is chibur, which is also the root of the word chaver, which means friend, chaverah. Human beings cannot live without connection. The rabbinic period also saw the sages trying to understand mental illness in practical ways. They distinguished between individuals who were permanently unable to make decisions from those who experience moments of clarity and confusion, and finally, those whose struggles appeared only in certain circumstances. Now, their language was far different from ours, but their insight remains familiar. Mental illness takes many forms, and no two people experience it in exactly the same way. Centuries later, one of Judaism's greatest thinkers deepened this understanding, namely Maimonides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, the great medieval rabbi and physician. He wrote that when a person becomes consumed by troubling thoughts, they withdraw from social life, or sometimes they lose interest in experiences that once brought joy. And Maimonides continues to say, healing must address the emotional life of the soul as well as the body. Nearly 1,000 years ago, Maimonides understood something that modern psychology now affirms, that the mind and the body are deeply interconnected. And therefore, mental health and physical health are deeply interconnected. All of these sources are biblical sources of King Saul and Elijah, the story of Honi the circle maker, the text of Maimonides. They remind us that Jewish tradition has long recognized emotional struggle. But Jewish wisdom does more than just describe the issue. It also values that guide and how we respond. For a moment, can we think about someone who helped us through a difficult time? A moment of loss, a moment of isolation, a moment of longing? Was there someone there? Maybe a family member or a friend or a community member or the leadership of a community. Were they there for that difficult time? And what did they actually do that made the difference? Often, it's not a grand gesture. Sometimes it's simply that they showed up. My mentor, Rabbi Micah Kaplan, Alav Shalom, used to teach something very beautiful. He used to teach that the greatest present to someone else is being present. So our tradition offers 3 values that help explain why being present is such a present, and explain why those moments that are filled with a comforting voice and a caring, gentle hand, why they matter so much. The first concept from our tradition is Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Bazeh, or as it's often said, Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lazeh. In either circumstance, this translates to all Jewish people are responsible for one another. Kol Yisrael Aravim Zeh Lazeh. It was the 16th century Sfat scholar Moshe Alshich who described the Jewish people as a single living body. And each person is like a limb within that body. Which means that when one part suffers, the entire body feels the pain. There's this curious episode in the Talmud that asks the question, what if an individual was a part of a community and they were so deeply connected with the community members that if you were to touch physically one of them on the shoulder, could the other community member feel that touch too? The response from the rabbis is fascinating because they're asking a question connected with this touch. And the question is, how many sets of tefillin do they need? If it's like the Jewish people are a singular body, like Alshich says, then perhaps only 1 set of tefillin is needed. Eventually, the rabbis come to the conclusion that everyone needs their own set of tefillin, but the story rings true for them. The idea that if one person is influenced by a moment, by an emotion, by a concern, it truly can affect the people around them. Therefore, it is a communal responsibility. We may not know always how exactly someone else is experiencing the world. We may not know always what someone else is experiencing at all, because emotional pain is deeply personal. But we don't need to know exactly what someone else is experiencing in order to respond. We can always respond. Sometimes responsibility looks like a phone call. Sometimes it looks like sitting with someone and simply listening. Sometimes it means helping someone to take the next step. And maybe that next step is reaching out to a therapist, a doctor, or a support system. Sometimes communal responsibility just means noticing. Noticing when someone has withdrawn, noticing when someone is quieter than usual, noticing when something just feels different. Jewish life on a communal and on an individual level has always been built on the idea that we do not carry life alone. And that must also be true for mental health. So our first modern concept of how we approach mental health is Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Bazeh. Our second concept is Refuah Shlema, complete healing. In our community, just like the majority of Jewish communities around the entire world, each week recite the Misha Berach prayer for healing. Before reciting the names of those in need or approaching community members to ask them who is in need of healing, I often say this very brief phrase. I say, it is now that we offer a prayer for healing of mind, body, and soul. That phrasing is intentional because in the prayer itself, in the Misha Berach prayer, we petition for refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, healing of the spirit and healing of the body. Judaism recognizes that human beings cannot be divided neatly into separate parts. We're not just bodies. We're not just minds. We're not just souls. We are all of these at once. And when one part is hurting, it affects everything else. And that's what Maimonides understood deeply. That the body cannot fully heal if the mind is in distress. And the mind cannot fully heal if the body is neglected. So complete healing, refuah shlema, means caring for the whole person. It also means recognizing that seeking help is not a failure. It is a part of the process of healing. And you know what? It's not just a part of the process of healing, it's vital. Just as we would not hesitate for a moment to seek medical care for a physical illness, we should not hesitate to seek support for emotional or psychological pain. Our first concept, Kol Yisrael Aravim Ze Bazeh. Our second concept of a refuah shlema, complete and total healing. And now our third concept, pikuach nefesh, saving a life. Perhaps the most important principle in Jewish law is pikuach nefesh, preserving human life. One of the most impactful phrases of rabbinic literature is pikuach nefesh doche Shabbat, that the act of preserving human life puts off all other obligations, including Shabbat obligations. And the Torah teaches, v'chai bahem, and you shall live by the commandments. You should never die by the commandments, you should live by them. Which means that the greatest command is to preserve life. And from this comes the powerful teaching that whoever saves a single life is considered to have saved an entire world. An entire world. Mental health challenges can at times put life itself at risk. And that means that this is not just a matter of awareness, it's a matter of responsibility. Pikuach Nefesh teaches us that when life is at stake, we act. We reach out. We intervene. We help someone find support. And as I shared just a little bit ago, sometimes that action is not dramatic. Sometimes it's simply being present. It's answering a call, sending a message, or saying, Hineni, I'm here for you. Because we know that when someone who is struggling, that moment of connection can be the beginning of hope. And we are a people of hope. Often that's exactly what we need. Many Jews today are also carrying a quiet emotional weight. Concern for Israel, rising anti-Semitism, the general uncertainty of our times. And even as we continue our daily lives, that emotional background can take a toll. Which is why I'm so grateful for this conversation tonight. Because conversations like this, they really matter. They remind us that no one should have to face life's burdens alone. I want to share a final story about connection. The conductor Arturo Toscanini once received a letter from a shepherd living in the mountains of Montana. The man wrote this letter, the shepherd, to this incredible conductor. The conductor, of course, led a Sunday evening concert every single week. And those concerts, they reverberated across the country. The shepherd's letter simply asked that at the next concert, Toscanini would lead the orchestra in playing the note of A. He said in his letter to Toscanini, I live in the hills of Montana, and my radio batteries are running low. I'm concerned that during the long winter, I'm not going to be able to play my violin in tune. So if you would please play the note of A so I can tune my violin before the radio stops working for the winter. During the next broadcast, Toscanini paused the orchestra and said, "Here, to the gentleman in Montana, is the note of A." Across the country, millions heard that single note. And in a small cabin, a shepherd tuned his violin. Sometimes we're the shepherd, and sometimes we're the conductor. A small act of connection can help someone tune the strings of their life again. Jewish wisdom offers us 3 powerful reminders. We are responsible for one another. Healing must embrace the whole person. And preserving life, pikuach nefesh, is among our most sacred obligations. Sometimes we feel like the shepherd, alone, searching for a signal that someone is listening, that someone cares. And sometimes we are the conductor, and we're listening and prepared to show that we care. And when we feel, and when individuals feel like the shepherd, our task as a community is to answer that call with compassion and presence. Because Jewish tradition reminds us, saving a single life is like saving an entire world. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time tonight to be a part of this important conversation. I'd be glad to hear your thoughts and questions.
Thank you, Rabbi Crane, for an inspiring presentation and message. And I am looking for that question that someone raised in the registration form. A few weeks ago, someone wrote in, many grievers feel guilt, imagined or real, notably feelings of not having done enough to help the dying person after losing a loved one. How do we deal with the self-punishment that arises with this? What does Judaism say about this?
Norn, just to make sure that I heard the question correctly, when we have a family member, a community member, a friend who is coming toward the end of their life, the question was, how do we navigate that?
Yes.
Okay, got it. As a rabbi, I have the blessing of walking with people, with community members, and with Jews in general through some of the most uplifting moments of their lives and through the most difficult moments of their lives. And often I'm familiar with this question. One of the most painful emotions that we can feel is regret. And when we reach a moment when we feel regret, that can wash over the entirety of our being and make it that the next step is almost impossible. So our tradition wants us to see the best of ourselves. That's the reason why we have an entire day dedicated to recognizing our past mistakes and trying to be better. That's when regret is at the forefront of our minds. Because we say, this past year, I wish I had done this differently. This past month, I wish I had done that differently. And I teach the youngest kids of our community that when it comes time to throw those mistakes away, to throw that pain away, like we do at Tashlich, that there's an opportunity for healing. So yes, regret is an emotion that all of us wrestle with, especially when it comes to moments like end-of-life issues. And our tradition wants us to know that our best efforts are the best that we can give. And what matters most is the next day.
Okay, we have another question. Rabbi, in the story of Saul, were there other specifics ever noted about his behavior besides the ones you mentioned?
The primary episode with King Saul and King David is when King Saul pursues David. He seeks to kill him. And he does so not from a place of hatred, but from a place of insecurity and a place of feeling as though he's not anchored. So what I mean by that is that Saul is chasing after the only person in Saul's life who was there for him every step of the way. The person who brought Saul comfort, the person who brought Saul love, who became a part of Saul's family. And Saul turns around, and from a place of insecurity, concern, and I think as the text rightfully describes, from a place of mental anguish and an evil spirit, the only thought that he can really wrestle with and the thing that consumes him entirely is that this person who loved me, who cared for me, is actually my enemy. So that's one of the primary moments of the Saul story. We also hear about Saul petitioning to the prophet Samuel, even though the prophet Samuel gave Saul very specific directions. Saul says, I don't need those directions. Let's talk to you, Samuel. Let's talk to your God. So there's a series of episodes that really highlight Saul's challenges. And as the text calls it, that evil spirit.
Okay, thank you. If there are other questions, now would be the time to pose them. As an aside, if there are those online that are viewing FJMC International for the first time, we welcome you. And I would like to also indicate that these programs originated as an outcome from the pandemic, when everyone was feeling alone, isolated, not being directly connected. FJMC put its best foot forward and began doing this programming as an expedient to what was going on back in the year 2000, the year 2020, 2021, et cetera. And what we have done over the past 5 or 6 years is to create a forum with programs like this. There have been more than 250, probably closer to 300 programs cutting across every aspect of Jewish life. And we would encourage you that if you have questions, would like to present an idea for a topic that we can address, please let us know. And we would be glad to engage that process with anyone that's listening or that will be back hopefully very soon to take part in another program. So while I was mentioning that, we do have another question. How do we help someone who is struggling with mental issues but doesn't want to change behaviors that make their mental situation worse?
Yes. Thank you very much. That is a very powerful question. This is very well true for mental issues, and it's also true for really all facets of life. When we see someone making certain choices that we know are negatively impacting them, the best that we can do, and I'm sorry to be repetitive, but the best that we can do is be present. So if there are any opportunities where they make their emotions available, when they open their hearts to hearing suggestions, that we're right there. So that way we can say, I'm here for you. I think that we can get through this together, but we have to do it in partnership. Because being a partner to someone whom you love, who is struggling, can be a challenging partnership. But we're invested, we care deeply, and that's also why it's so hard to see. So again, I think the most powerful thing that we can do especially for folks who feel as though they can't change or the behaviors need to stay the same, is to be there and seek those moments of clarity and moments of focus and be able to step right in.
Okay, another question. So many people suffer from anxiety, from a minor feeling to debilitating illness. Does Jewish tradition say anything about this?
Absolutely. So the rabbinic period, when the rabbis break folks into categories, into those three categories, they recognize people who have a minor feeling, as it's been phrased. And what they say is that when someone has a minor feeling, that's when to use that phrasing that I just used a moment ago, that's when we step in and we can help to lift them up. Now, the rabbinic story of this is that there was a rabbi during the period of the Talmud, who was known as a healer. He was someone that could go and heal his colleagues. And he found a colleague who was in need of healing. He steps in, he touches the colleague's hand. The colleague immediately feels better, gets up, walks out of the room. And then, as the rabbis love to do, they flip this story on itself. And they say that that rabbi, that healing rabbi, himself became sick. And what helped him get up was a visit from that same rabbi whom he had healed. So it's as if there's an exchange of healing. And so the rabbis ask this question, why, if he is a healer himself, couldn't he get up out of the chair himself? And the rabbis answer, because no one can free themselves from a prison. In other words, when there is mild, it's difficult to call it mild, but when there are episodes of anxiety which are somewhat temporary versus debilitating, the rabbis see both of those as opportunities to help free someone from that moment. But on a practical level, what they discuss is what are the religious obligations of someone who is navigating these emotional responses. And for someone who is experiencing temporary anxiety, that individual does not have religious responsibilities during that moment. Whereas someone who has debilitating mental health issues, they are never obligated to religious obligations. So what the rabbis showed was compassion and care, and also, I think, a very thoughtful understanding of the human condition.
Okay, one of our good friends on the West Coast raises this question: for someone who is interested in exploring other mental health issues in Judaism and in the Bible, can you suggest any next reads beyond the examples you've given of the story of Saul?
Absolutely. So there are several organizations. In fact, Norrin linked to one of the organizations in the explanation and summary of what I was going to be speaking about this evening, called the Blue Dove Foundation. And what the Blue Dove Foundation does is not only do they describe the ways in which the Jewish community can be present and offer resources to those in need, it also does so from a Jewish textual tradition. So they have seven different elements of the Blue Dove Foundation, and each one of those has textual evidence as to why it's relevant. So I would say that is the best next read, because it goes even further into depth through our texts to understand and to become more familiar with this area of Jewish thought.
Okay, thank you. What can we learn from when David feigned madness?
Oh, interesting. As in the dancing episode?
Uh,
No, it's this. Hang on. Sorry.
Psalms when he's running from Saul, I think.
Okay.
No, it's the psalm that begins LeDavid b'shanoto eta molif ne'avi melech vayiger shehu vayelach.
Okay. So, can you say, so I'm familiar with the psalm. Can you say just a little bit more about the question?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to know, first of all, why he did it and what it says about his understanding about what is madness. I mean, psych wards are sometimes called loony bins,
Yeah.
insane asylums.
Yes. So, what the very powerful examples of King David and the very powerful examples of David as an individual are the ones of an imperfect human being, as they ought to be. And so, with this idea of madness, with this idea of imperfection, King David offers us examples of how to navigate life. So, at certain times, the way that he deals with the emotions that he's feeling is through writing biblical poetry, which is what we were just describing, the biblical poetry. At other times, it's during times of elation, and so he dances. At other moments, King David makes very interesting life choices regarding his relationships. And in all of these different examples, what we do see is someone who is navigating a life of pain and struggle, but also can find moments of joy and elation. So I think when we describe someone who is dealing with very serious mental health issues, that the primary responsibility is to seek help, to help them find the help, and for us to be present with them. So I think that that's one of the important lessons that we can learn. Additionally, when someone is finding moments of elation, even though they have mental health struggles, that those are moments that we should help them hang on to tightly and dearly.
I guess my question is, just generally speaking, compare and contrast, what is it being mentally ill and being insane? What is the difference between mental illness and insanity? I guess is my question.
Sure. So we actually have someone on our call who has exceptional familiarity with these specific terms and this terminology. So if it would be okay, I would very gladly turn it over briefly to one of our people who are here on the call with us. Does that work well, Norman and Bruce? Does that work okay?
fine,
Okay.
oh, fine.
Okay, great. Now I also have to ask permission from the individual who's here on the call with us. Lee, would you feel comfortable sharing with us kind of the distinction between the terminology?
I'd be glad to give you my opinion.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Lee.
I don't think I've heard somebody call mental illness insanity in quite a long time. And I think that basically it's a form of mental illness that's gone undiagnosed and needs to be diagnosed and treated. And I think if a person were telling that to me, am I insane? I'd want to know what they're talking about in terms of the symptoms they have and try to explain what it means in terms of an illness and how to treat it.
Thank you, Lee. I really appreciate it.
Okay, earlier we mentioned there was a reference to the Blue Dove Foundation, and the organization is online. The standard reference to the URL the Blue Dove Foundation.org if anyone wishes to take a look at that organization in greater detail. I think at this point, we're almost at the top of the hour, and in recognition that we have 4 time zones represented, and the needs of this topic can go on endlessly. We will obviously, moving forward, look forward to the opportunities to engage Rabbi Crane further on this topic and anything else that people might be interested in raising as we move forward. With that in mind, I would like to, on behalf of the FJMC and my colleague Bruce Fagan, wish everyone a happy and peaceful Passover as we approach that holiday in the coming week. And I'd also like to recognize and extend my great appreciation and thank you to Rabbi Nate Crane for a wonderful program this evening. And if anyone has a particular interest in contacting Rabbi Crane, please let us know, and we will be the dispatcher of all of the information that others might be seeking in the way of issues.
Can I interrupt for 1 second?
Yes.
Can I experiment with everybody? After Norwin says goodnight, before you leave, put in the chat one word takeaway from tonight's program. All I want is one. Okay? That's all. And thank you. Go back to Norm.
Thank you. Thank you, Bruce. So getting back to these key words, FJMC, considering where we're going as an organization, friendship, Judaism, mentorship, and community, we're all operating in the same sphere with things that are important, not just to the FJMC, but to our overall community. And please take a look at our programming as it gets posted online and sign up. And if you have ideas for future programs, let us know. We do take everyone's suggestions very seriously. And in the coming weeks, we have some interesting programs that will be announced very soon. So on behalf of everyone associated with FJMC and Rabbi Crane, thank you for spending part of your evening with us tonight. And again, wish everyone a happy, healthy Passover. Thank you.